All right. So December 13th, Richmond Housing Committee kicking off here at 5:30 in the evening. Um, last week's agenda or last month's
Just
agenda.
just a comment, Mark.
Yeah.
I have a hard stop at 7 o'clock. Absolutely, I have to go. So, if we
Yep.
could, or you guys can keep on talking without me, because you'll still have a quorum. That is awesome. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. But thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. And I believe Keith, you do as well, right? Isn't there another
No,
meeting following on this? I
no,
thought
I
you.
mean, I'd like to be done by 7. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
So we've been at it since 6 to 6:30, but it's all good.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So November 7th was when we met last. Do we any questions or comments from or changes to the minutes from last meeting?
Did Matt get to see the minutes?
Yep, I briefly read them. I was kind of paying more attention though, looking at the kind of the active discussions currently. Which seems like some of them are continuing, honestly.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
a
Yeah.
couple active discussions for sure.
Yeah.
No changes.
Okay, then we can accept those minutes as they are moving forward. Adjustments to the agenda today. Are there any comments from the public? Tyler, if, you're welcome to join, obviously. I don't know if you came in with any specific comments you would like to make.
Yeah,
No,
he's
just mostly observing and reporting. I have my own meeting I have to run at 6 o'clock at 7 o'clock tonight, so I'm just trying to just listen to the conversation.
Great, Tyler. Are you from Richmond?
I'm the zoning administrator, actually.
Yes, you are. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you. I'm so sorry. Thanks.
That's all right. I'm notorious for not having my video on, and I keep Tyler M, so I don't usually put my full name on there. So my apologies.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Welcome. Thank you. All right. So perfect. Any other comments or adjustments? I think we're good. Great. So kicking off the meeting here, Matthew, do you want to just share a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
what drew you to the committee?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first I'll start off. Virginia kind of asked me to join the committee. I've been active in housing related issues for the last probably 8 years now. So yeah, my background is it's actually in computers, but when I met my wife, I had been investing in like rentals essentially. And so we kind of grew a portfolio of rentals in the greater Chittenden County area. And essentially kind of have built those up. And a lot of it has been fostered, fortunately for me and for my tenants, specifically in the Winooski. They about 6 years ago kind of changed their zoning so that it was easier to infill, right? These density discussions we're having. So, I bought these single family homes and I was able to build, 2 more houses or make it a duplex or whatever, so on and so forth, long story short. So I've kind of been on this density train for the last 5+ years. And we've done some new builds, some renovations, kind of a mix. I'm currently actually building my own house. We're taking advantage of the recent zoning change in the Village RC district, and we're building a second primary structure here at 112 East Main Street. Didn't really want to start it at the beginning of winter, but my wife's pregnant again, so it's happening. So yeah, that's kind of what drew me to it. We have a serious problem. I mean, we've been really fortunate, but we've got to figure out a different way to kind of try to build this housing, because even this house is going to cost, just under $300,000. It is a bigger house. It's not super small, but even the smaller builds, are about 150,000 now. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of what drew me in.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
it's great. Sounds like you have some good experience to share.
Thanks. Yep.
Yep. Thank you so much for becoming part of the committee. That's great. Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Just briefly. So I'm Connie. I lived in Richmond for 30 years, raised a family here. The kids are all gone. They went to cities on the East Coast. My husband and I still work, and I work at the university. He's a teacher, and I got interested in housing as an equity issue, essentially. Virginia?
Sure. Virginia Clark. Hi, Matt. Chair of the Planning Commission, have done planning or select board or something for the last almost
Something.
40 years, one way or another. This is my second go round here with the Planning Commission. So anyway, yeah, I've lived here about 40 years, like Connie, raised a family here. One of my children lives in Huntington, so we're still involved with that child and the grandchildren. My son lives in New York. He never wants to live in Richmond, so that's okay. That's not a problem. I mean, a lot of kids don't want to come back. Some may want to come back, but
Yeah, I
um,
know. I get that. I meant to say that too. So I actually grew up in Richmond. We moved here in the early 2000s, 2003. So I actually lived up on West White Hill Road. Went to the
oh,
middle
cool.
school and high school and so on and so forth. But anyway,
Mhm.
sorry, interjected there.
All right. You might know my kids. I don't know. Anyway, so housing, we know it's an issue. I personally don't want to give up all the other quality of life factors for housing. Climate change to me is a huge issue. Um, so we have to work on all these problems together so that we can not solve one at the expense of another one. So anyway, and I am supposed to be just the liaison from the Planning Commission, but when we had so few members, I became an actual member. So if we have more members, we started with 9 members on this committee, believe it or not. So as we grow again, I may go back to just being the liaison to the Planning Commission. So anyway, all the issues, all the different committees are working on pretty much similar issues. So,
Yeah.
yep. Mark.
Yeah, Mark Hall, been a Richmond resident for about 5 years. Moved to here in 2018. And similarly, I have a couple young kids. I like to make it so that Richmond slash Vermont can be a place where they are able to raise families as well and be a little bit more affordable. I can only imagine what it's going to look like in 20 years from now. Um, and so got involved in the committee for about 2 years ago. And as Virginia mentioned, we had a number of folks leave the committee for various reasons, and Tanya and I said, who wants to be the chair and who wants to be the secretary? So that's where we're at right now. So thank you for joining. Oh, and we do have my wife and I do manage a couple rental properties in Williston, and so we've have been in the business, not as extensive as maybe you have with building, but really some familiarity there. Keith, I
Right.
don't know if you've
Sure.
met Keith.
Yeah, Matt, I don't think we've met, but I'm pretty sure we probably know of each other. I'm your planning and zoning director, and Tyler, who's on this, is our zoning administrator extraordinaire. So, basically, I've been at this gig for over 2 decades now. Do have a passion for housing, and I live in Burlington. I own property in Burlington, but I do have an affinity for Richmond. 3 years ago, I was your zoning administrator, and then I came back recently as your director of planning and zoning. Looking to let's move forward on those infill, try to hopefully increase some density and without giving up that quality of life. I mean, that's the trick at this point. So that's me.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Great. So I think tonight we had really a couple topics that we wanted to, where did my notes go? That we wanted to talk about. Really, these are active discussions going on in the community here. But we had Jolina Court and particularly around density for their subsequent phases of the project. And also Brown's Court as well. So Keith, I didn't know if you had an update that you wanted to share on the Jolina Court piece as to
And
where.
yep, I mean, this the impetus of getting Buttermilk or Jolina Court on board with some density changes was the housing report that we dropped on the select board. And they took relative umbrage to it, but it was based on the data we had at the time, so we weren't going to correct that. But moving forward, they reached out to me and I reached out to them, and they are interested in looking to increase their density in phase 2, which has recently been approved. They're maxed out at 45 units right now. That's their max for that whole property. They're looking to increase that, well, almost by 2.5 times, up to 125 units for all 4 phases at this point. And that's, I think the conversation that I'd like to get started really centers around the appetite for increasing the density. How large is that appetite? We've talked a little bit about that, we being Virginia and I, because there's a tie-in obviously with the Planning Commission. So we certainly want to discuss it here at this level. We do need housing. I don't think we need to beat that horse. I think we know that. It's what level do we want? What do we want out of this? How do we want to go about doing it? Do you as a committee want to support this? Do you have any recommendations? Ultimately, it's going to go to the Planning Commission, and that's a conversation for next week also there. And we could probably give them a little flavor of what this board or this commission wants to do. And my update basically is the conversation has begun. They were at the Planning Commission last month. I thought they were relatively well received. They seem to have been in lockstep, the two leads for Buttermilk, which is always a good thing when you're dealing with them. And at this point, I have a meeting with Josie, one of the principals, Josie Keitel, one of the principals, on Friday, and it's kind of a touch base with them, so we're all on the same page, so that when they go to the Planning Commission, that there's no surprises, or you can kind of coach them on what to expect to a certain extent. My approach has always been to be semi hands off. I don't have a horse in the race here. But I am your planning director, and I do have a vested interest in seeing that housing is increased in the town of Richmond. So maybe not vested, not in the monetary sense, but in the personal sense for sure. And so that's basically the update. It is in the infancy stage. A little bit more than that. It's kind of fleshed out, but to open it up to the rest of the board, I'll leave it at that with my update.
When Josie was in front of the committee last week, did they share the ask of up to 125 units and or the density at 125 and did they share about like what their plan was to get there?
Well,
Yeah,
so I could speak to that. If just looking at their proposal, they actually went at it kind of from 2 different directions. They suggested that possibly their final build out was 125 units. They would like the zoning to be changed from their max of 45 to 125. However, they also were at pains to say what they wanted for building number 2, which is on the table. So it has approval, building number 2, with the 31 units that they have remaining. They have 14 units in their building number 1. They have 31 units remaining. They would like an additional 24 units in building number 2, which they propose to make on the same footprint as the currently approved building number 2, but to make all the apartments smaller, to make many more small apartments and less of the larger apartments. They made the larger apartments because they had to only have 31 units. So they feel that they can take this building on the same footprint and add an additional 24 units, just having smaller, like studios and 1 bedrooms rather than 2 bedrooms or beyond. So they also stressed in their letters that they've sent to us that the future is hard to predict. They don't know what market conditions are going to be like. They have a commercial requirement on their ground floor. They don't know what commercial is going to be like. So there are many questions about the future beyond building number 2. They had originally set up a system where they had 4 buildings. If they build building number 2 with the remainder of their units, the other 2 buildings would be commercial. They don't know whether they'd ever get there because commercial may not be there for them. So they had kind of these 2 different approaches going that we're going to talk about at the Planning Commission. One is to just talk about changing the zoning. The zoning will have to be changed either way. Changing the zoning just to allow for building number 2 to have more units. That's one thing that they were asking for. Rather than saying, okay, over 15 years, you can have a total of 125 units, which may be more difficult to sell, I would think, than increasing just the number of units in building number 2. They can come back and try to amend their permits at any time, you know, so that's, I think that was interesting and something to think about, the difference between just allowing them enough units to satisfy their goals and allow them to move forward. According to them, they can't move forward because of the economics of building number 2 unless they can have more units. So one approach would be to just allow them to have the units that they say they need in building number 2 and let the future take care of itself. So that's something that we could think about. And Keith, I don't know if you sent this committee the letters from Buttermilk. There are 2 letters that are involved, one dated 11/15 and one dated 12/5. They came to the Planning Commission, but, you know, eventually they might come here. That was kind of the gist of it, was, you know, we have these 2 needs. And I think they were like opening the door for us to possibly go one way or another.
Do you mind me asking a couple questions here?
Go ahead.
Did they specify how many more units they were going to need to make the economics work in any of those letters? Did they give
They
you
said
an ballpark?
24 units in building number 2 to be added to the 31 units.
Okay.
So
They
their
want
total would rise from 45 to an additional 70 something or 60 something. Let's see. 24
69.
plus 45. What?
right.
69.
69. So their
Right.
total would rise to, if we change the density
Yeah.
to allow them to have 69 units, then that
Okay.
would be just for that building.
And these building requirements also require, these are like 5/1s, meaning the ground floor is all commercial, has to be on each building, and then the 4 floors above it are commercial, or residential. Is that correct?
Well, in Jolina Court, the ground floor must be commercial. The basement floor, because this building is going to be on 2 levels, there's going to be a walkout basement. The basement floor and the upper 2 floors can be residential. That is
Okay.
what is in the zoning right now. So another thing they're requesting is that less of this space be required to be maintained for commercial purposes.
Yeah,
Because finding it hard to fill the space they've already got in building 1.
Yeah, I mean, I don't obviously as a builder, I don't work remotely, but obviously it's so many people are. And you know, there was that sign in front of their building, you know, the building that's already been built. I think there was like an old Edward Jones in there. So there was some kind of investment in their company in there for a while, but it was vacant for what, 6 months at least, maybe a
Yeah.
year.
Raymond James. It was
Raymond
vacant
James.
for a long time, and the
Yeah.
rest of the space was like almost accidentally used by Green Sea to during the pandemic period to like expand some of their offices. And if you look in the windows of the rest of the ground floor of building number 1, it looks like a storage closet.
Yeah, I've walked by it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so it
mean,
has some labs apparently, and and they may move back out at some point.
Right.
They don't really want that space. So
Yeah, I mean, I personally think given the current climate and maybe commercial will come back, but it seems likely that like office space, so to speak, is not going to gain ground. And I would personally think it would be good to change the regulations for them to be able to have housing on all 4 or 5 floors. I do think there's a couple issues right away from an access standpoint for more units in terms of egress in and out of there. I mean, I'm all for a lot more units, but did they do any kind of how they're going to deal with the traffic in and out of that one road? Has that been talked about at all? I mean, 69.
Yeah.
What?
I
Sorry.
was gonna say you're on.
I'm sorry,
Keith,
I was
yeah.
muted. Well, they did a traffic study for the current approval, but they haven't done it for this ask at this point. They would have to do that at some point for sure.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
were these big design changes for the additional, 31 units? Is that correct? Would it be
24 on top.
24
Well,
units?
they claim that they're going to put it into the same footprint, so the design on the outside would be the same, as I understand it. Is that right,
Yes,
Keith?
that's what I
But what would
understand.
be different would be the design on the inside.
They have
Yes.
a stoplight there still, or just be a stop sign or some kind
Oh,
of.
you're talking about, oh yeah, no, at this point, the level of service doesn't require a stoplight at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, that has to be vetted. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we all know. I mean, we all know what happens in the mornings there. I want more units, but if there's all those cars there, the mornings that Bridge Street backs up all the way past the round church.
Yeah, but luckily we're getting a left turn signal there too, which should alleviate some of that. But that remains to be seen. I mean,
Yeah, and
it's going to happen, I should say. That left turn signal is going to happen. But I'm just curious to see how that moves the traffic forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to figure out a way to make it economically viable for them, and but I'm not sure how passing that zoning wise, so on and so forth through the town, how easy that's going to be.
yeah, and they are pretty much limited to that one access point. And we also don't know how that will fly with Act 250. That they will have to get an Act 250 permit for this second building. The idea that you'd have a second access through the town center parking lot was never well received. So possibly an emergency egress in case there's some kind of natural disaster or train toxic spill or something on the tracks there. But so the traffic, and it seems like, and you can correct me, Keith, if I'm wrong, but what happens usually with the traffic study is if you want to approve it and you approve it and the traffic looks like it's going to be more than the maximum allowed, then mitigation methods are put into place. There would be a stoplight, or there would be a 4-way stop sign, or there would be, some kind of mitigation measure that would be put in there. So that would all have to be looked at.
Yeah, that's correct. And it all comes down to the level of service, that the roads can handle.
And anybody who's lived in any other city finds the traffic, momentarily slow, but
No, it's always
anyway.
school time pickup or the rush hour at the end of the day. It's not long for sure.
No,
Yeah.
everything's relative. It certainly is. I mean, I grew up on Long Island, believe me. The Long Island Expressway, it doesn't compare. So
I feel like the
So
traffic.
anyway, so the planning commissioner wants to decide if we're interested in thinking about it. A zoning change would be required. We would have to put together the zoning change. Do we want to think just about the short term? It seems really problematic. We're having a lot of difficulty with thinking about the long term because the long term is so unknown and it doesn't provide you with any certainty anyway because they could come back and ask for an amendment to their permits. So anyway, all that will be discussed and definitely reported back here.
I mean, I feel like a short term, let's focus on building 2 and then tackle building 3 and 4 as they come up would be a better strategy. Just thinking about 125 is a big number, right? And 15 years is a long time, right? Ish. And so that could put off folks in the community, right? Thinking that big for the town of Richmond.
I mean, I really tend to agree with Mark here. This is kind of just personal anecdote, but it seems to me that even just the recent village RC changes, increasing basically most lots by maybe one or 2 units was kind of contested. And if you're talking about 2.5 timesing it, I think you're going to get a ton of pushback from people, make it really hard to pass it. And yeah, even if we only get, 24 more units or whatever it is, that's better than 0 units.
Yeah, that's something for sure. Yeah. So Mark, you and Matt, you're going to be on the planning commission in 15 years. Connie and I probably not going to be involved in this discussion in 15 years. Keith, maybe.
we're not.
Or not. But so it's going to be up to you guys to see what the conditions are in 15 years.
Right. Now, so I know we've been tracking a bit around, the affordable piece, right?
Right.
And what does that look like? It sounds like in our discussions in the past, right, making an earmark that X number of units have to be affordable if we grant this density increase and things like that. It sounds like from at least reading some of the emails or letters from Josie that might be a non-starter. That's a non-starter for them, or they can't make the numbers work. But I feel like there has to be some way that maybe we could help make some of these units affordable. And I don't know if that was something that was discussed. I know she's had the talk track of, well, a lot of mine are under market rent or market rents are under market. And they have a lot of small units or like studios or 1 bedrooms that could be more affordable, right?
Mhm.
But they're also not the definition of affordable units. So did that topic come up at all last week or part of the discussion coming up?
Well, I'll say this first and then Keith can add in what he wants to, but their whole strategy has been that actual technical affordable, guaranteed affordable housing is too difficult and too expensive for them. But their approach has been that they're going to make the units workforce or small enough so that they are relatively affordable. And, we're going to have to look at the numbers a little more closely, but they have said that they have under AMI units, that they have what would be technically affordable units. They're not guaranteeing them to be affordable because of the paperwork and the other associated difficulties about affordable housing, but that they feel that a number of these units, especially if on the same footprint that they were going to have 31, they're now going to have 55. Those are going to be small units. So relatively affordable for that whole middle section of people who don't actually qualify for affordable housing, and for developers who don't want the difficulties associated with affordable housing. Those would be serving a purpose. So far, that has been their approach. They are not willing to commit to perpetual affordability.
Correct. I would echo everything that Virginia has said. Their focus is on getting Unit 2 off the ground, and the only way that's going to happen, according to them, is to increase the density. That's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, I mean, as a builder's perspective, as you increase density, your cost per unit decreases because their footprint's probably not going to increase significantly.
No,
That's
they
always
say
one of,
zero. They
What's
say it's
that?
not going to. They say the footprint is not going to increase at all.
Oh wow, yeah. So from a cost perspective, it drops it significantly. I know that's always been a problem for me. Is I do a lot more smaller units, 1 or 2 units, maybe 3 at most.
Right.
And I can't. I mean, truth be told, I can't rent them below market, to make a living doing it.
Mhm.
So I see where they're coming from. It's the problem is we all know below market is still well above. Like what's the HUD pricing for a 1-bedroom now? I just looked it up the other day because one of our rentals is like $1,400 a month, I think,
So I'd have to. Yep.
from a 1-bedroom. So a lot of people still can't qualify for 1-bedrooms. But that is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. So anyway, according to them, it seems like the affordable part of the housing is out in that location. They do not want to sell land. They don't want it to be owned by an affordable housing entity. They don't want it to be managed by an affordable housing entity. They want to do their thing, and they want some of the units to be relatively affordable because they're going to be small. So that's their strategy. We have to take that into consideration, I think.
Okay. Patty, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah. This has been a while since I looked into this, but Burlington made a rule, and I think it's still in effect of when a developer is going to develop property, a certain percentage has to be affordable. And then there was a study done, 10 years after they started that practice, and it was very effective. I have a hard time hearing, well, they can't make enough money on it. Okay, how much money do you have to make on something? It seems to me we hold the cards here in Richmond. We can potentially, maybe that's something that we can be thinking about, is if we have developers wanting to develop and put in units, that a certain percentage of them has to be affordable. I'd be happy to, I'm not prepared right now to give you that document, but I would be happy to get it. What Burlington did, I don't know if they're still doing it, so I'm really kind of talking out of my hat. But I would be happy to do that research and pass it along. I do think, they're increasing their units. There's certain, the question is how much money is enough profit. If a person loses money, of course, they're not going to do it, but clearly that has been done in other places, making the developer have to do a certain percent. And I know that would have to be some kind of rule change in Richmond, but we might want to be thinking about that. It's not a choice, it's not a choice. Like, I don't want to do affordable housing. Well, sorry, if you're going to do more than 5 units or 10 units, then you've got to, do 10% or something like that.
Yeah, we originally did talk about this with the first building, with building 1 of Jolina Court. We talked about several different approaches, including density bonuses, which is, giving them a bonus of extra units if they were willing to, using the carrot rather than the stick. because if you just prevent them from doing anything, then there aren't any units, if you know what I mean. If they feel they can't get money from the banks to make this project work with a certain amount of money, and you know, it's not just about profit. This is how these people make their living. They have to get money from the bank to be able to, they have a lot of trouble because of the commercial requirement anyway, getting money from the bank. The banks don't like that. So, you know, they have to be able to put together some kind of a package that they're going to be able to get money to do this. So it's not like as simple as just saying, well, you have to do these units. You have to do affordable units. I don't know. I mean, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. We have actually about 5 or 6 commercial loans for our different properties, depending on what it is. And, you know, they first off, they do require a significant down payment for those, usually in the area of 25%. So they're really costly. The hard part is getting them off the ground. And recently with inflation, you can start a project in 6 months. 6 months later, it could cost, you know, between last year and this year was significantly higher, in the realm of 10 to 15%, depending on different materials and projects, so on and so forth. I think it's a really tough question, being on kind of one side of it. We want to get units built. Yes, that's what we want. We want to get units built. That's going to help. Should we set a affordable requirement? I'm not sure. Virginia, I'm more curious about what you said, the carrot approach, where you said you were going to give them a bonus if they had some affordable units that were required. That seems actually like kind of a win-win there. What did you actually talk to them about that?
Yes, we spent a long time talking about density bonuses, and we had a bunch of different town benefits that we were offering bonuses for, that we proposed offering bonuses for. One was to provide additional parking for the town rather than for their building. That was one. We had a density bonus for like handicapped accessible, more than what is required by law. So that would be for like senior or elderly housing. We had a density bonus for affordable housing. And the fourth one was for energy efficiency. So we kind of eventually whittled it down to affordable units because they wouldn't bite on any of these things. They said there weren't enough units to make it worthwhile. You know, if we gave them an additional like 5 units, maybe if we had offered to give them an additional 20 units, if they put in 5 affordable units, you know, we never could have a number at which they were interested in it. So that was the problem with the density bonuses. And we talked at great length to the folks in Heinsberg, the planning people in Heinsberg, about this, who said that they had never really been able to make it work well. I don't know if they have by now. This was 5 years ago, but it's too difficult to give them enough to make it worthwhile, you know, to give them enough units. Out of 125 units, maybe it is, you know, I mean, if we're willing to go very high with units and to give them all 24 units that they want, let's say, for building number 2, if they make a certain number of them affordable, I don't know, that could be a
discussion.
Maybe
discussion.
that's a strategy, letting them say what numbers would work for you to include some affordable units in the package, right? And let them kind of do the math there. But I do remember, I mean, we had Jericho come in, was it a month and a half ago? They talked about having a lot of these carrots that they had in town that developers weren't taking them up on. Now Jericho's a different community, but I don't believe they have city water sewer similar to like we do. So that there's some additional hurdles there.
Yeah, so carrots are only as good as if people want them, you know, if they want to buy in, and we never could hit on any kind of amount that they
Right.
felt they would take up. So we felt it was better to have some units rather than no units.
I agree with that. I think the final thing I would say is if maybe don't require affordable units, but if you limit certain aspects, like essentially parking, you could potentially, that would automatically force affordable units potentially through the senior housing, or the people that actually do live in town, because that's just an idea, not necessarily for it, but there's maybe ways to kind of funnel it to be affordable based on the fact of somebody might not rent an apartment there if they don't have a
Guaranteed spot or something like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would just, in closing on this, I would say that nothing is off the table at this point. I mean, we are at the beginning of these discussions. They are doing a pretty large ask here. And I agree with Patty that we do have, we're coming at this from a position of strength. I do think we are.
Tyler, you have your hand up for a while.
Yeah, so this is me speaking more as myself, not in my official capacity as a zoning administrator. So I do want to caveat that. And I, Patty's point, other people's point, isn't lost on me. It's not hard to look at, really the dire need we have for housing, particularly affordable housing in the state, and not feel compelled in some way and look at the amount of money people are getting in rents and saying that, oh, well, there's got to be something that we can do that, kind of getting to that point of how much profit is too much profit. I do think we should be a little careful with that because yes, developers do reap the benefits of the project, but they also take on the risk. So, nobody's going to bail them out if they put together a building that doesn't work and they lose their shirt on it, or for whatever reason, the market tanks and all of a sudden what they thought they were going to make money on, they're not, and they go out of business. So it is always worth kind of bearing that in mind, is that, when you're asking them to subsidize something to provide a public good without subsidizing any of the risk, right? Or being able to realize that there is very real risk to them financially for doing something for the public good, that does come at a cost. And we should just kind of lose, it's easy to look at it from a profit standpoint. And again, be like, geez, these guys are making a killing. But again, that just as easily when the real estate market crashes, right? They're also the ones bearing the cost of that. So it's just important to bear that in mind.
Yeah, and just to add just a little bit to that is that we've tried all along on the planning commission not to develop an us versus them feeling about developers, because without developers, you don't have housing. If nobody's willing to build housing, then you're not going to have housing either. So it's not like we want to cast the developers as the bad guys. They are necessary. We need to work with them to make projects that work. So anyway.
Great. Yes, Patty, one more comment there.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be speaking so much in your meeting, and I'll back off here. But I have to say,
I think she's frozen.
Buttermilk is in a position where they own this property. They have great plans for the future for this property. They are our biggest commercial developer. It looks like to me, maybe I missed something in our downtown. I think we do have some levers here. It's not like we're hoping the developers will come in. They're already here. They own the land, they've invested in it, and they would like more. So I think we have quite a bit of leverage here. And these prices sound ridiculous to me. $1,400 for a teeny little place. I mean, that sounds like that's probably is going to change over time. I can't imagine, but maybe you can keep charging those kinds of prices over time. But it seems like we have an opportunity right now because they want it, and they want it a lot. There's not a lot of great places to be building these days. So I don't know. I don't think we need to, give away the store.
but the housing committee doesn't actually have anything to say about it. This is the planning commission's work, right?
I know that Virginia's here.
Yes, that's true. Right, but in terms of our agenda, this is something we might want to support, but this is not an actionable item. This was more of an update for us, wasn't it?
Yeah, at this point, yes.
Yeah, okay, good to know.
Well, I was gonna ask, Keith, is there something that you do feel like you need from us as this discussion evolves? Maybe not right now, but in the next
Yeah,
3 months
I
now.
yes, yes, I think that'll be something that Virginia and I will talk about also. But certainly to keep your ears open and do some studying of the materials that we send. Look at the meeting if you can show up to the meetings, and talk. I mean that's fine also. Again, I just want to just caution that this is at the infancy stage. And it's probably going to take at a minimum. I'd love to see this done in 6 months to get building 2 up and running with whatever horse trading we can do. And I totally understand where Patty's coming from with that. But ultimately, yeah, we'll probably be looking for some type of recommendation once we land on what we can when Buttermilk lands exactly on what they want based on our discussions at the Planning Commission.
Matt, do you have another comment there?
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's fair that to ask them for a pro forma or like what an estimated profit and loss is at whatever at market rate rents or just slightly below market rate rents. They've had to run those numbers for their commercial lenders. And I think, I mean, maybe they don't want to share them, but I think that could be useful for everyone to see and analyze, especially the planning commission, because that would show you a lot of the potential profit, or how much we think it is, but how much maybe it is not. So anyways.
Great. Well, I think the second update, anything else on Jolina Corp before we move on? I think it's a good time to move on, but okay. So the second update is around kind of an update from on Brown's Court and some of the discussion that has taken place since our last meeting. I know we had chatted here as a housing committee to look at the discussion of Brown's Court came up again in our housing committee last month in November, and looking at from some feedback from the public as to, hey, there maybe is an opportunity to provide to the community both the use of the property, but also is there an opportunity to have some development on there as well. So that was some of the feedback that we had received, and we had talked about, okay, well, what could be a potential option next there, and discuss having some type of, is there a what's possible study, feasibility study with that potential piece of property. Now, I know subsequent after that meeting, there was a discussion at the select board. I believe it was last Monday. And I don't know if Keith or Virginia wanted to provide any kind of update there.
Well, I think the update would be that I've been tasked with seeing if housing can fit on the lot as it is configured. Not necessarily with what's going around right now, but I mean, I'll do my own study on that for the select board meeting on Monday. Tyler and I walked the property today. I think everybody knows you can engineer anything, to be honest with you. There is not a lot of room on that parcel though, when you're talking about a ball field on there. So I've been tasked with that. I have no skin in the game here. I've been tasked with doing a pretty generic up or down, or at least some type of presentation to give to the select board on Monday. And I have not delved into that too deep at this point. That's basically the update right now. I think that the select board is looking, and I don't mean to speak for them. They're looking for either an opening or closure, an up or down. And as Bard would say, we're at the yellow light. We're not at the green light or the red light, So he makes it that simple, and it's not quite that simple, but I understand where he's coming from with that. It remains to be seen what I come up with. I have not spent any time on this. I'm looking at a 20-unit structure currently as configured, the ball field configured. How does that work with parking, stormwater? There may be an access issue, which I haven't looked at this point. From there, that's basically the update, Mark, at this point.
So is it a little bit like a mini feasibility study, like the first brush?
Yeah. Basically, are are they going to give myself the ability to go forward and procure a consultant to do a professional plan at some point? But the first step, is it feasible or is it not feasible? And they also have to take into account what the public has to say too. And that's on them. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here just to present them, give them a representation of what I'm going to come up with based on 20 units.
And Connie and I had a conversation last week that took a slightly different angle, which was the possibility that doing any kind of a feasibility study may be premature if the desirability piece isn't there. So, for me, that's a question that the select board may, it has its own agenda, obviously, but we could also consider hiring some kind of a consultant to do a community outreach study to see if it's desirable before we decide if it's feasible. So that would be another angle that we could take. And I think that would have to be managed by a facilitator of some kind, an outreach specialist who would be able to ascertain the desirability of using this property for building prior to deciding if it was feasible to do. So anyway, just another approach.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to spend money that in a wasteful way, for sure.
Matt, you had a comment there?
Yeah, so I echo everyone's comments here. My big thing is would it be worthwhile just to actually have an attorney or somebody do a title search to see if we actually have a right of way there? Is there a right of way that we know of? Because before we do anything, if we don't have a right of way, it's kind of irrelevant, right? Whether to do a feasibility study or so on and so forth. I'm just looking at that parcel viewer.
Yep.
And it doesn't look to me like that parcel has a right of way based on that.
Access to a road.
Yeah, sorry, right of way,
Yeah.
essentially legal access, egress and ingress from Brown's Court onto that parcel.
Yeah.
A title search only costs $300 and could save tons of time.
So it's glaring, Matt. I mean, that's one of the first things I noticed when I looked at the aerials. It is something that needs to be understood for sure. Yep.
Okay. I know we had talked about that study. I did reach out to our previous consultant that we had used, Brandy Saxton. She's no longer in the community and not taking on additional work here in Vermont. I'm not sure where she landed. But that was somebody that we had talked about last week or last month. We had this discussion. I would say that if we were to do, I mean, I do like the kind of the gauging of public opinion, right? I mean, I know there's been a lot of discussion. There are a lot of folks that border that property or live on Brown's Court that joined our housing committee meeting this past summer when we were discussing potential options. I know that there was a lot of public opinion last Monday during the select board meeting as well, from some of those same neighbors. And so I think that part of it is also maybe not knowing what is possible, because I think sometimes when you hear about building or development, it is folks might go to the extreme that this is going to be a 400 unit monstrosity. There's going to be giant parking lots, and it's going to totally change the character of the property, right? And so I guess what I'm getting at is if we were to do some type of public opinion feedback, having also some imagery or some thoughts of what could be possible, right? So there's folks not going off of what they might think this could look like in their minds, but there's some concrete examples. So I would just say that if we went in that way, having some concrete examples or some potentials of what might be possible for the folks in our community to also have as a reference point
I agree
would be
that
helpful.
I agree that people do better when they're looking at a picture, a drawing, an image, because then their brains are focused on, oh, this is what it is that we might be asked to make a decision about. But you can't do that until you've done some of the other things, like Keith is doing a walk around, and he has to report to the select board next Monday, and there could be a title search, and so this is and I think also that these things become interwoven with each other, that as information gets developed, it informs the public, because this is a transparent process which anybody can watch or read or about or participate in. And so the picture emerges over time about what exactly is this that we're talking about, and how will it change, and what will the benefits be, and what will the costs be. So having an agreed upon plan for how to move forward, I mean, that's what I think why we have Keith, is so that whatever those logical steps are, we can say, here's the plan for moving forward, and then we can execute the plan. I don't think, we were just talking about Jolina Court that, well, we should just take this one step at a time. But I wonder if in the case of Brown's Court, there should be a way to say, we have a process, it's a good process, come and participate with us, whatever that process is. I just feel like there's already enough emotional content in this conversation that it will give people a certain amount of feeling of security if they know that, well, it's not like a decision is going to be made on Monday, or, any particular, all of a sudden out of the bag it comes. It helps people to know what to expect, whatever the process is.
Yes, Patty.
Yeah, I agree with Connie that the process has to be outlined. It could be that you find out this week as you look into this that it's not feasible at all, and that could become the end of it. It could be that it might be feasible, and then the next step, I would think, wouldn't necessarily be a money step. It would be to see if any of these builders, Champlain Housing Trust or whatever, they could look at it and they could give us their feasibility of it. And if they're not interested, then that's gone. But then there could, if it's yes, then the next step could be public engagement before there would need to be a vote. We're not going to be able to go turn this land over that we own as a town to Champlain Housing Trust, I wouldn't think, unless we had a vote in town, so that would be something the town of Richmond would vote on. So it wouldn't just be the neighbors who would be talking about this. It would be a community engagement potentially if you ever got that far. But that's a long way down the road. You know, I think what Keith is doing is really important. First step. Second step seems to me like, okay, if he gives us a green light, let's find out if the housing people are interested at all. Can they make it work building it over that ravine, for instance? Is that even possible for them? Is that something they want to consider? If the answer is no, then we stop again. You know, if it's a yes, then we do community engagement and try to help people get what the vision might be. We get an RFP. Here's what it could look like. That's free. And then we'd have to do an engagement, maybe hire someone. And then the last step would be a vote, it would seem to me, in town. So there are several steps. And I think it would be great if this committee outlined that, you know, so that there are lots of, you know, there's lots of breaks along the way. That, I mean, having community engagement now just seems like there's a lot of rancor out there. And if we don't need to have the rancor, why have it? You know, if Keith finds out we can't do it, then it's over. And we don't have to have, you know, difficult conversations.
I guess the opposite point of view is that if you put a lot of work into it, first of all, you become invested in it. And secondly, our planning and zoning staff is got many things on the table at the moment. So it's not like there's an infinite amount of planning and zoning that can take place before you even find out if this is something that townspeople want. So, yeah, so I would do it a slightly different way. Also with a process, there's no point in not having a process, but finding out if there's an appetite for it.
Yeah, I would add that this is being driven by the select board, obviously, and yeah, I've got to take my cues from them at this point. And I've done very little work on researching this. It just dropped in my lap. So yeah, this is another one of those. We're at the infancy stage. So we'll see how it goes forward. And I agree. I do need a path forward. And the first step is to figure out, is this possible? Is this feasible? I think it's possible, but at what cost? I think that's really what it comes down to. You know, you can engineer anything. And I know that that's an oft-used phrase. But you know, I'm trying not to let my emotions cloud what I need to do. I feel that way. So I'm kind of relying on the select board to give me that direction.
Yeah, I'm confused. I read the minutes from last week, and it sounded like you guys, the housing committee, was and has considered this piece of property. What am I not getting?
We did a report on that for the affordable housing report. But you know, I was not an author of that report, so I should let somebody else from the committee talk about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we had put together the housing report looking at, I think it was 5 different potential properties, mostly those that were surrounded or on the city water sewer, or could potentially have the water sewer extend with some reasonable cost. It's still pretty expensive to get out to the gateway right now. To see if there were some projects that would work. And really it was some public opinion and kind of, you know, do these parcels have a checkbox that like a Cathedral Square is looking for to make a housing development that they could fund work, right? So city water sewer, accessible by sidewalks, 20 plus units, land ownership, meaning that they would prefer to own the land versus leasing it or renting it or something else. And you know, we had looked at Brown's Court. I think what we had said is at least from what we heard from the neighbors, this was not something that they were very excited about, and had you know, put on the report as maybe not one that's at the top of our list to develop. Subsequent to that, I think we've heard some other feedback from the community that this could work to have both the needs of the public met with facilities for walks and playing softball and for the school to use it, as well as have some housing that goes on there as well. And then I think that's where the select board also took up the question last week as well, and had kind of a public forum on it. And that was something that the housing committee wasn't made aware of ahead of time, so we weren't necessarily prepared to have a discussion or represent or talk through that discussion.
I was at that meeting, and so I decided to go to the minutes of the housing committee to see what you guys were talking about. And it looks like on November 7th, that was before the select board meeting, you were talking about Browns Court, and you were thinking about looking for it. So it was contrary to what Keith is saying. This didn't just appear, it doesn't seem out of the blue from the select board. This is something
I would say when we presented to the select board that report, there was some fairly lukewarm, non-committal responses from our select board members as to really much of the report, other than come back to us with a plan as to what you would like us to approve. And so then it was prior to that November 7th meeting, like I said, there was some feedback from the public about, hey, maybe this could be a possibility. And so I know Connie had shared some of those thoughts that came from some folks that she heard from during our November 7th meeting. And that's kind of where it came up again.
Nice.
But as far as the select board discussion, we weren't aware at the time that was going to happen on last week.
Yep.
And one of the things that, was on our mind with that report is this is not the only place that you can have affordable housing. So we would like to be able to put our energy, such as it is with our small number of members, now 4, was
bigger
3.
now, Virginia.
Was to put our energy into something that had more potential. If you're going to have a project, if you're going to put your energy into trying to work on a project, then perhaps you should not pick one to start off with that has so much baggage, so to speak. So, that was one of our goals, was putting it all out in front of the select board, was to say, unless you have some serious commitment here to this, we would like to proceed in a direction that isn't so fraught. So, and that was with all of the pieces that we had looked at to that point. So, what resulted in it was we had both Jolina Court come out of the woodwork, and the select board kind of came out of the woodwork about Browns Court to, which maybe was a good goal of that report. It still seems like, we've only got a certain amount of energy to put forward housing. Maybe we need to put it in a direction where we're not going to end up with so many challenges. Anyway, I see Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, I think for either Jolina Court or more particularly for Browns Court, has there been the discussion, I do rental housing, that's how I make my living currently a lot of the way, but towards actual home ownership units. Champlain Housing Trust, the first house I ever bought was actually a shared equity home. And I really think it's a really great path to home ownership. And I looked over something of theirs recently, and less of the units that they're building are the shared equity home ownership units. I really think it'd be great if we're trying to do the affordable aspect of it, if discussions were talked about, down the road, obviously, about how to do these kind of shared equity programs or home ownership in some way. Because I think for a lot of people, me included, when I was getting my start, it was like an awesome way to buy your first home. And I think there'll actually be a lot less public pushback if it ever comes to it, if these are, packaged as these are homes people are going to own, as opposed to rent and maybe turnover 6 months, a year, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Yeah, and I think out of the housing report, right, we had also discussed that there are, and it was brought up again on the Monday meeting, like there are other ways to encourage affordable housing rather than one huge development. There are other ways to encourage you know, have places to live that might be smaller, more affordable for individuals. That could be, you know, making our changing the housing density, right, in some of our districts, right? It was one way, and you know, continuing to encourage that. So the shared equity program could be another.
Yeah, I just meant even for
as
like
well,
a new
right?
development, it's kind of like a PUD in a way. And you have those, if it's 20 units, instead of having them as rental units, you know, they'd be purchased and sold. And the people that qualify, sorry, I should say this, that have to qualify for like the Champlain Housing Trust shared equity units have to be under a certain amount of, you know, income threshold and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So yeah.
That was a comment made at the select board meeting, I think, Virginia, that someone said, how can we, if the goal is to help people who have like teachers, police force members, you know, people who work in the town of Richmond, how can we help directly support people who want to live here and stay here and be part of the community in that way? So I think I'm reiterating what I've also read and heard in other places, but I think that's a great way to consider going forward too.
What, to have more home ownership opportunities? Is that,
To
yeah,
to build in equity. I think that's what Matt called it,
Yeah.
is to I think that's, although I don't, you know, I mean, now I'm really headed off into territory I don't really know that much about, but I've read that younger generations aren't as excited about necessarily owning a home, that there's a lot of work in owning a home, and that they find it you know, for whatever lifestyle that some of them choose to have, that it's nicer to have someone else take care of that. So I don't know that we should necessarily be biased in one direction or another. I think we should be supportive, because how people connect from, you know, the way they want to, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is kind of like the place we all come from, I think. And how we help people do that in the state of Vermont and in the town of Richmond is something that we're still trying to figure out. So I think we should think about how to help people be homeowners, but maybe we also have to help people think about how can you own what you need in order to have, or have what you need, or find the housing you need in order to have the life that you want in Richmond. I just feel like I don't know enough. And that's part of why Brandy Saxon did that report for us, to help us understand the diversity of need. And as I think about it now, it's pretty diverse. People want all kinds of stuff to have their lives. So I guess my very roundabout conversation here is I am in support of what Matt said, that supporting equity-based home ownership is good, but that doesn't meet necessarily everybody's needs either. So there could be a diverse set of ways to help people do that. I think I'll be quiet now. Thanks.
Well, just looking at time here, being 6:47 Eastern, want to see if there's any action items we want to take from that discussion on Brown's Court for next week, or wait until, Keith, you do your assessment there. Do you need anything from us for that?
Yeah, I think we should wait until we get any feedback from the select board at this point before putting it on as an agenda item. I think Jolina Court would continue as an agenda item. But I think Brown's Court remains to be seen.
Okay.
That's my sense.
Keith, did you say you're going to be reporting back to the select board this coming Monday?
Yes.
Because I didn't see
That's my
on
hope.
okay. I'm probably thinking about a different agenda that I saw, which looked like it was all budget. but would it be helpful for us to show up at the select board meeting?
It certainly wouldn't help, but I don't want to, take your time. I don't want to take your time. It certainly would not hurt, I should say.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that. I just don't know at this point. I've spent so little time on Brown's Court recently, and that's going to be my time's going to be called on Friday for that specifically all day, right as I sit right here. And hopefully get something to the board by Monday. And I'll let them know if it's incomplete, I'm not going to present it. So it just doesn't make sense if it's not complete to present it at this point.
Oh yeah, got
Did I
that.
answer your question? I hope I answered your question finally.
Yes.
Yeah, budget meeting
We'll
was
wait
last
for more.
Monday. The budget meeting was last Monday, so that was a fun meeting
Got it.
also. But
Oh,
yeah,
got
this
it.
one coming up is I have a department head meeting tomorrow at 8:30, and I'll know if that's to see where we are on the agenda for that, and I can let you know.
Great. Thank you so much.
I write that down.
Right. I think we had one agenda item around recruitment. Obviously we do have a new member, so thank you again for joining, Matt. Do you have any friends or colleagues that would be interested?
It pays really well.
It is as well.
Patty, you're invited too to join if you wish.
Yes.
I'll join you here. I'll definitely join you here and there.
And if you do find some additional information, Patty, as mentioned around what Burlington is doing, feel free to pass that along.
Oh, I will. I'll who should I send it to you, Mark?
That's fine. Yep.
Okay.
And there was a 7 days article, I think, in last week's 7 days about the affordable housing problem. It was about evictions and about
Yeah.
the difficulties that can arise in some of these affordable housing projects where people essentially don't have any money because they're not free. The rent is there's still a rent that has to, nothing is free. So, and many people apparently who live in affordable units don't have any money, which is a problem. It's a problem for the affordable housing entities. They can't support that.
That
With
was
their
a
business model. So
That was a brutal article. It really was.
brutal.
Point of
It was
view of
brutal.
the sheriff. Gosh. I'm looking at the AMI for Vermont. So housingdata.org is what you want to go to for Vermont for all that. And that just breaks it out in table form for you. But Patty, by all means, please forward it.
So Matt, I'm
I'm
glad.
not sure what you're talking about, Keith.
I was talking about the area medium income for housing, and they break it out into, based on what your percentile is, how much your rent should be or how much your mortgage should be. And it's usually inclusive of utilities. So, it's all spelled out on the chart, but housingdata.org is really a good place to start.
Okay,
And
thanks.
one thing for Matt that I'd like to say is that one of the earlier projects of this committee was to look at the demographics, and every year to update that information. So I'm glad that you have some IT background, because we really should be doing that again, is each year we should be updating that information that we have in our database. So at some point, Mark, we will want to put that on the agenda that we want to do that.
Well,
Yes.
the way Ravi did it was by hiring an intern from University of Vermont. So he hired someone who then spent from about September to December on a project, and I could probably pull her name right out of our past notes. And not to say that and I think there was a process that could be repeated so that, future interns could do the same thing. At least that was the picture that I was getting from Ravi, is that it was something that was repeatable. the thing that was going to take us time was looking at it, understanding and saying, so what? What does that mean? You know, what should
Which we didn't do,
we
right?
didn't do much. No, we
No.
took a kind of high view of it. But then there was a transition, and so we could go back to that definitely as an agenda item. But also having specific projects to work on that meets the recommendations of the report is a great thing to do too. So they're both good, I think. Anyway.
Well, our next meeting will be in the new year, so that might be a good place to start.
And
Is
we're back to the fourth Wednesday.
We should be, right?
yes,
Okay.
our next meeting is Wednesday, January 24th at 5:30. Mark, there was a agenda item on communication with planning director. Are we good with that? Yes, we are. Okay, so
Yep.
I will take that off. I had set that up ahead. Okay.
All right. So next meeting, Jolina Court, on the agenda. Do we want to talk about updating our statistics and creating a plan for how to tackle that?
Well, I
Okay.
mean, we might want to at least just talk about like the plan for the next year. You know, what do we see this committee doing over the next year? I think would give us a little bit of direction to
Okay.
help us to figure out what we want to do in the next year.
Okay.
So we put that on as a discussion item.
Yes. And probably an update on your Browns Court study. I'm assuming we'll probably want to talk about that as well.
The other thing that we might want to do at some point, and I guess we can talk about this when we talk about what we want to talk about next year, is the housing development on Perpetual Lane. Do you all know anything about that? So it's a housing development of
Condos, right?
yeah, it's houses, I think. I mean, it's maybe it's condos. A developer who also holds to the, you know, home ownership as being key here and builds affordable houses, according to him, and wonders why the rest of the world doesn't build affordable houses. You know, what's wrong with us that everybody is not building? You know, Patty, you'd probably like him. He doesn't seem to want to make a profit. I don't know. Anyway, I thought maybe we could have him come in and talk to us. He just sort of throws up his hands and says, well, everybody should be building affordable houses. I can build them, so why can't everybody else? Anyway, I'll find out his name because I can't remember what it is. Gary Bresser told me about him. So.
Okay. Yeah.
That sounds
Maybe
good.
it's houses that are affordable, not affordable housing.
Correct. Yeah.
No, it's not affordable housing, but they're affordable. You know, people can buy them because those words are often used interchangeably, which they really aren't. It's either, you know, so we have to be a little careful when we talk about our teachers and our firefighters. They're not going to live in technically affordable housing. You know, they're going to want something at least that's affordable, but it's not probably going to be affordable housing. That's for people having less money than they do.
Perpetual Lane, where is that right now? I'm just trying to, I wasn't familiar with it.
It's out towards Jonesville.
Oh.
Oh,
I just wanted to take a look, see if it was up yet. I didn't know about this.
Yeah,
It's
down
right near the highway, where the highway crosses.
Yeah, close to there,
Over
just
to-
at the beginning of Jonesville.
Okay.
And they've had like maybe some Habitat for Humanity work there too. And there's, anyway, we have to find out this guy's name because that's what he does. So.
That'd be great, Virginia. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, it is 6:57 here. I think we've hit all the agenda items. Any other final comments?
Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You as well.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Yep. Bye.
Thanks for coming, Patty.
Sure.